Hi, I'm Jon Leslie, and today I'm here with Jonathan Zabel.
Hey.
Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, of course.
And Jonathan, you are a senior producer on a large free-to-play mobile game.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been in the industry quite some time.
About 12 years.
Excellent.
Hard to believe.
Very cool. Yeah, time flies in game development. Could you give me or give us a little bit of background about your experience in the game development industry?
Absolutely. So I started at EA back in 2008. I was an intern in 2007. I remember back then, it was like this crazy thing happening where, there are these free-to-play games on Facebook with farming involved in some way. And, so I basically was involved some really early usability work on Dead Space and Madden in the beginning. And then I moved on to a bunch of small startups doing free-to-play mobile and Facebook games. And then I had about a 5-year stint at Riot, all sorts of different teams on League of Legends, like hardcore, engineering-focused teams.
Massive operation over there.
Huge. At that time, especially huge.
Were they using Favro when
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember there was like a good chunk of years where we used Favro.
Excellent.
Yeah. Especially, we could dig into that so much because it was really helpful.
So when you came here, it wasn't that much of a...
No.
Yeah.
I think the industry is realizing that a lot of what you need to do is not just give developers lists of tasks and then knock them down, like basically just digitize the producer with a clipboard. You need to actually think about what are we making, why are players going to like it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Favro, I think, is a lot better than many other tools at accomplishing that.
Yeah, that's good to hear. So your current project, can you give me a feel for team size, length of production?
Absolutely, yeah. So we're about 60 people. When I started around 2 years ago, it was mainly like a waterfall operation. That clipboard mentality.
Yeah, test people out.
Exactly. And over the years, we've shifted into more of a cross-functional pod system. So we got about 6 groups of 10 devs each, and they're all the skill sets they need to accomplish a specific outcome. So, you've got artists, designers, engineers, QA, production, they're all working together towards a shared goal.
So when did... were you using Favro as soon as you moved here, or?
So it's interesting because there's sort of this gradual migration, even though the tool had always existed for us here, because what Favro can do needs to be paired with a specific mindset, right? So as we shifted more towards this outcome-oriented way of development, I found that it proliferated on all the pods. And we had, even for the strict waterfall stuff, we started switching over. So we had some outsourced art production of some 2D illustration. And then we've got everything from the gamut to truly fast prototypes, maybe more of a lean Kanban style.
Yeah.
And then, right in the middle, the sort of known problem, unknown solution space, the feature development space, we have Scrum teams all using Favro.
Did you find that the team members, the artists, the engineers, actually wanted to use the tool?
It's funny, I've always said that artists are sort of the early adopters of Favro because aesthetically it's just, nice comparatively to other tools, especially if you have like a UI artist or UX designer. They'll look at the competition and they'll look at Favro and they'll say, I'd rather do this if it's quite all right. But then, you start digging into more of the feature set, how easy it is to customize the fields, to create the type of visualization that you're looking for. You want to do a spreadsheet, Favro can do that. You want to do a Gantt, Favro can do that, right?
Lets you work the way you want to work.
Exactly. And so my change management approach to this on all of the pods that I've been working with is to try to talk to them about the problems they see in their workflows. And then, typically as a trained, change agent, I would basically just start in paper because paper is the most flexible, and then find the tool that sort of could do most of the ideal workflow for the team, But in this case, you really don't have to start in paper because I found that Favro basically does most of what I needed to do.
How has it spread maybe from software development to
Yeah.
other functions?
Sure, yeah. So, we have a roadmap. It goes out for the better part of a year and beyond, large epics and, pretty ambitious outcomes that we want to achieve, more at the problem statement level, or an opportunity space. Here's this big thing that we want to capture, this big thing that we want to solve. And it's not even, it's the why maybe, like there's this metric, this behavioral change we want to make in an audience, but not the what. It's not like, okay, well, we need to make this type of feature.
Yeah.
So our leadership team works in that space mostly. But then, of course, the teams work in the feature space and the devs work in the task space. Yeah. So
And then the how.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it. So why, what, how, right? And so we were looking for a tool that would effectively strategically ladder up through those three levels. And what's really nice is that you can totally do that. I'll spare you the nuances of like how we did it with boards and collections and tasks living in multiple places. But what's nice is that that's possible. So if you want the 50,000 foot view, you've got it. If you want the 50-foot view, you've got it, and it's all the same data set.
Your time in the game industry, how have you seen things change?
Right.
Business models, everything's live now, especially in the space you're in. It's not AAA game development per se, where you ship a gold master and then you're done. So how has things changed both from a business model standpoint, and how has production development had to adapt to that?
Yeah, it's interesting because there's very few projects I can think of that you can just get an asset list together at the beginning of a 3-year dev cycle. We've already, in every project that we've learned, the assumptions you make before you go into soft launch are almost immediately you're flipping tables in week 1 because the metrics tell you that the thing that you thought was going to be the bright burning fire right after launch is not there. It's over there. This thing has been burning the entire time. And you have to be able to respond. And it's a fine-grained way of thinking too, because it's not immediately obvious how you're going to address some of these problems. So it's a matter of, as a producer, being able to climb that ladder we were talking before. Like I think it's fine. Like, there's always going to be art teams, design teams, and engineering heavy teams. And they're always going to need lists of tasks. But the biggest shift I've seen is that if you're trying to be a successful producer, you're more focused on the outcome you're trying to achieve. And then instead of being dogmatic about whether you're using Agile, Lean, or Waterfall, you're saying, how do I best support this outcome?
You're in a space where you have to be shipping new content, features, maybe weekly, daily even.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, shipping patches every 2 weeks, back when I was working on League, right? And then before that, we were doing mobile game releases at least every month.
It sounds like your processes have evolved to support these new ways of working, these new business models, really.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, whatever you want to call it agile. It's really just releasing smaller bits of functionality, content more often, and getting that feedback and continuing to respond and adapt.
Yeah.
So from a tools perspective, how would you say Favro helps support that way of working?
I think what's great is this feeling of, because it's always painful when you're a producer, when you understand that there's some upwards communication, and it kind of ties your hands to like make the visualization exactly how the devs would use it. And you're missing out on something if you haven't responded to the devs' needs. So they're basically self-serving their own process. So I'll give you an example. I was working with maybe a 20-person live ops pod on this project. And I wanted to build a visualization and a workflow that they would self-serve. That was sort of my agenda from day one is there's no way I'm going to keep track of 20 people's worth of work. So how can I customize this workflow so that they're totally bought in And so it was talking to every individual, because there's tons of disciplines on that group. There's lifecycle marketing, QA, product managers, engineers, 2D illustrators, right? I'm sure I'm forgetting people. I remember lifecycle marketing was very particular about, hey, whenever we're doing a player-facing communication, we needed a brief, and the brief looks like this. And we were able to create a Favro board that made sure that the tickets were templated, the right people were notified, the right people were assigned. We built it bespoke for them. And then I remember our artists were the same way. Hey, when a PM gives us some live ops art to make, we need to make sure that it's perfect. We understand what this is for, what the reference images are, and same thing. So we were able to get 2 or 3 bespoke workflows within the broader workflow of that pod, and it all
almost on the fly.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it took. I had a 30-minute meeting with those groups, and I was able to build a prototype.
And
that was pretty good.
To do that in a tool like Jira would be.
I don't want to think about it. I feel like I'm trying to make some changes to the bug database now, and it's for going through the IT administrator, and we're testing the changes, and we're already like 3 months into the change management on some very simple changes.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that hard.
Shouldn't be that hard.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's go there a little bit. So as far as Favro specifically is concerned, do you feel that it's helped replace some existing tools? Do you integrate it with other tools? Let's talk about that a little bit.
I think it's the go-to place for any strategic work on our project, full stop. And that's been the case at almost any place that I've used it. So when you're talking about leads level, team level, task level, then it's basically, it runs the gamut.
Yeah.
You don't need to say, I have this tool is specifically for, the leadership level, the outcome level. This tool is specifically for administering a pod that's delivering a feature.
Do you use any of Favro's existing integrations to other tools, to Jira, to Slack?
We definitely use the Slack one. So, I think that's, basically become industry standard Slack, right? So, you've got a Slack essentially for every pod, right?
Oh, okay.
And then you've got a Slack even for the leadership pod, right?
And those are all tied into Favro?
Yeah, exactly. So as things are changing and shifting throughout the sprint, if you're sprinting, or as things are shifting and changing in more of a lean system, you're getting live updates on.
So something's ready for review or ready for release that updates the appropriate Slack channel.
Exactly.
From a kind of customer success, responsiveness factor, what's your experience been with Favro?
It's kind of crazy to see things that I talked about with Favro back in the day, like back when I was at Riot. Now they're they're in there.
Yeah.
Especially the most recent stuff that came out. The ability to basically turn your backlogs into spreadsheets, the timeline views, all of that stuff is really great.
3 different toggles on the boards.
That's the one, exactly.
Notifications on the sidebar, a la Slack.
Yeah. That's a very familiar design paradigm for people. So it kind of makes it. I think that's what kind of Favro has been doing is they've been saying, hey, how do devs actually work? What UX paradigms are they used to? Because when I look at Jira, you have to be so conscious to not have an overwhelming abundance of required fields and workflow states. It's harder to get into that mess with Favro, and I think that's naturally going to lead to more usability.
And I do think that's been by design.
Yeah.
They didn't want Favro to turn into a Jira, and they've been successful with it.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very good.
I think that the results can be measured with one metric, right? Which is always my metric. Do the devs move cars themselves? That's it. That's how you should evaluate a tool. Because if you're in any kind of situation as a producer where you're saying, this system works great that I've designed as long as I'm manually moving everything every day, you've already lost.
What would you say if you had to say your top 3 favorite things about Favro? What would they be?
I mean, cards and boards living in infinite places. That's the obvious one from the very beginning. Which
is very unique, I would say.
It doesn't exist anywhere else, right. Because that's the backbone of being able to construct a flexible view. It's kind of like the model view controller thing from CS, right? You just basically make infinite, controllers, infinite views of the same fundamental data set.
So it's the building blocks, the flexibility is there to essentially create whatever flow you want.
Exactly. And then, of course, the usability, even more than like it looks pretty. I'm talking about the actual, intuitiveness about how things move, how you modify and manage.
Makes sense.
That's clearly been given some attention. And then the last is the flexibility. Like I think it's great that you can pin and unpin certain fields. Like my personal Kanban in Favro looks vastly different than the one for the production group, looks vastly different than the one for one of the pods, but yet cards can exist all 3 of those places.
Even if it's the same boards or cards, you can tailor your view specific to you.
Yeah. And that's how, when we were talking about that live ops example, it was so easy to make the perfect lifecycle marketing workflow, the perfect 2D illustration workflow,
right.
The perfect character development content pipeline, the perfect feature player journey map.
So, with all of your experience in the industry, what are some closing words of wisdom to other people in game production, game development, or people aspiring to be in game production, game development?
Yeah, I think this, my parents are both writers, right? And similar to being writers, where anyone can say they're a writer, anyone can say they're a producer. And so it leaves this sense of imposter syndrome, like, well, what I'm doing, it's not really a hard skill like engineering, like being an animator, right? There is a body of research, of literature over 200 years old when it comes to how do human beings ideally work together to make something great, right? That's real, that's scientific, and that is invaluable. So when you're feeling that imposter syndrome, at least what's always worked for me, is to remember that this is, yes, it's an art, of course, being a great producer is an art, but it's also a science. And when I go and I learn from this tremendous body of literature in Agile, in Lean, in Waterfall, or even back, in traditional manufacturing techniques, I realize, there's something great about what we do, to make the SEAL Team 6 or the elite, surgery unit, these or the Olympic team. These are all groups of people doing something together that they couldn't individually do, and our skill set is special.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that's a great way to put it. It's we kind of bring to that table that concept of how do we collaborate as a bunch of disparate disciplines to build the right thing, the what and the why, the right way, which is what the discipline specific brings into it, the team members, whether they're artists or engineers or audio engineers, whatever the case may be. And then it's up to production, right? It's up to producers and development directors, scrum masters and agile speak to do it fast.
Yeah.
And to do it effectively. And I think that's a skill set in and above it of its own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I always say we don't ship animation. We don't ship code. We ship characters. We ship experiences.
Right.
If you're not framing it in the player-oriented way, you're missing the point.
And it's bringing all of that together into one cohesive package.
That's what matters.
Yeah.
When you yourself play a game, that's what you feel. It's funny because we can literally, work so hard at our individual discipline making a video game. And then, if you're an artist, an engineer, a designer, a producer, you go home, you play your favorite game, and you don't think about that. You don't think like, I wonder how they engineered that.
Yeah.
You just think, I'm having a great time or not great time playing this game.
Right, and that's the magic of it, right? When it all comes together, you don't even think. even if you're in the industry.
Exactly.
You don't even think about how did this come to be, and that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks,
John.
John.